Alright, so we're going to talk about Substance Designer's iRay renderer, and you're probably wondering why I'm in Painter. Well, I cheated a little bit, and I'm actually going to export the textures out of Painter. So all this stuff I have going on in here is going to be exported out of Painter, just as a PBR metal rough, and we'll take that into Substance Designer. So get that out of Painter, take it into Substance Designer. And here's the OpenGL renderer. So we go over here to renderer. It's on OpenGL right now. This is the default renderer. You can drag and drop in your environment maps. You can hold down Control Shift and right click and kind of move that real-time render around. It's using the materials over here. And I have these outputs plugged into my materials. The only weird one right now is the emissive map that I have plugged into my head. Everything else is just base color, normal, roughness, and metallicity. So let's talk about this render right here. So what I'm going to do is X out of that 2D view here, and I'm going to really crank up my 3D view so we can see what's going on here. Because really all I care about is my 3D view, and I don't even care about my graph here, and my settings over here. So basically, we'll start from the right and move to the left. So renderer, it's set at OpenGL right now. If I change it to iRay, that's going to change it to the NVIDIA iRay renderer. And the first thing you want to do is go over here to Tools, Preferences, 3D view, and underneath iRay hardware, go ahead and turn on your graphics card. Turn off your CPU so it's not as chuggy when you're kind of moving around and doing interface stuff. And I'm on a GTX 770 mobile, so it's not going to be super intensively powerful, but it'll be good enough for this. So hit OK. And of course, the navigation is the exact same that you would use with your other renderer. And again, hold down Control Shift and right click to kind of spin that around. And you'll notice it kind of reses in, and that's just kind of like a Keyshot style or an Octane style or Redshift style of renderer where it kind of just reses in. And where that is, if you go to Render Edit, you're going to see you got your min samples, and max time, as well as Caustic Sampler right here if you want to enable that. Firefly will also get rid of set to true by default. I get rid of really those kind of pinpoint pixels that kind of show up sometimes. But anyways, you can set your min samples and max samples. If you set your max samples super high but your max time super low, it's going to default to reaching your max samples before your time hits. So basically, if you crank up your max samples and give it 5 seconds, it's only going to, it's going to render to your max samples regardless of the time you have set. So something to keep in mind. And under render, you can go in here and pause rendering as well. Moving along, if we go over to Scene Edit, you can go in here, and if you have different objects in your scene, you can enable them for the display or the viewport, and you can enable them for the actual render itself. You can also go in here and change the subdivision method that you want to use, if you want to use a subdivision method for your objects. If we go to Environment Edit, you can change your exposure over here. Under the dome, right now it's set to infinite sphere. If we change this to sphere with ground, you're going to see it gives me kind of a ground plane as well as the sphere behind it. And if we kind of look into the ground plane here, you can go down to the texture scale and you can kind of scale it more or less just to kind of get it to fit within your scene. And again, if you hold down Control Shift and right click, you can spin that sphere around. And right now our dome ground is set to false. If I turn that to true, we'll actually cast a shadow on that dome ground. The position of the dome ground you can actually change. If you want to raise that up or down, left or right, you can kind of go in here and you can double tap to set those settings as well. You kind of have a hard time seeing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a little bigger here, and it's, keep a medium icon, and I'm going to go down here to like a studio view. I'm going to drag that into my viewport, and that'll give us a studio scene in here. And now we can kind of play with so the ground is set to true. If we change the reflectivity from black to white, that'll make the ground reflective as well as crank that glossiness up. And now it'll give you like a mirror finish on this bottom here, and it'll actually reflect whatever your object is. If we go over here to Camera Edit, this will give you a lot of settings that might look familiar when you were using the original OpenGL render. You can change the focal length of the camera, and right now it has use window resolution set to true. If you turn that to false, if you go over here to your camera, save render, it'll actually save it'll save your image based on what resolution you have set. So if you want to overcrank this resolution, you can certainly do that. The aperture diameter is going to determine how fuzzy your object gets. So you can get that lens blur effect in Photoshop, or the depth of field for a camera. For the focal distance, what you want to do is hold down Control and tap in your scene, and that'll go ahead and set the focal distance. So if you want to set it to, say, her head and fuzz everything else out, you can Control tap on her face and then change that aperture diameter to determine how fuzzy you want it to be, the farther away from that point you want it to get. So right now, since I have it set so high, it's kind of got that tilt shift look going. You can also go down here and enable glare, some post effects like the vignette stuff. You can still go in here and do color correction, all that good stuff, exposure. So all this stuff is still available to you. Under the lights, you can go to lights edit, and these lights are still available to you if you want to go ahead and add some point lights to your scene. And under materials, definitions, this is where what the materials are calling it. So right now it's physically based metallic roughness. If I was to export the spec gloss model out of Painter, I could change it to the spec gloss version of the material and then drag it in, and that would work. If you go over here to materials edit, so let's go ahead edit. You can change your DirectX normal. Since I exported out of Painter, it actually reset it to DirectX. And you have a bunch of cool stuff in here like the anisotropic, scattering, absorption, refraction, all that good stuff. So you can play with these all day long, as well as you can go to materials, definitions, and load, and you can bring in your own material definitions if you'd like. So anyway, once you have that all set up, you can drag and drop in your different studio setups or your different environment map setups. You can play with the ground plane or not. And let's go ahead and do camera edit. I'm going to crank that aperture diameter down to 0 so everything's going to be sharp. And then I can kind of position my character here, try and get a beauty render out of it. If I want to, I can go to environment edit, and I can turn that off. And that way I just have a blank color behind me. And then I can go in here, and I can still hold down Control Shift and right click and kind of move that environment around. And once I get it to where I like it, I can go over here to camera, save render, and go ahead and render that to a file.